Thanks for staying with us.
Yeah. Let's get into our next discussion now. The modern-day slave trade in Libya has caused outrage worldwide.
Yes, indeed. And Libya's Ministry of Foreign Affairs says a committee has been established to investigate the auctions of migrants in the country, calling for joint cooperation with the international community. Now, slave markets are said to be springing up across North African countries, where people are being sold for as little as $400.
Libyan authorities have opened an investigation into alleged slave trade in the country. The power vacuum in Libya after the fall of President Muammar Gaddafi has made human trafficking and people smuggling a booming trade there. A CNN report which has caused global outcry says hundreds of people have been auctioned in modern-day slave markets in Libya for at least $400. According to Libya's Interior Minister, Al-Arif Al-Kujar, an investigative committee has been formed to gather evidence on the claims. While the United Nations is considering sanctions to fight the slave trade, Burkina Faso's foreign minister has recalled its ambassador to Libya over the report.
We must leverage the sanctions regime against Libya. This regime, established under Resolution 1970, will enable us to set up targeted sanctions and implement them against individuals implicated in human trafficking, owing to their responsibility for grave violations of human rights.
Libya is the main transit hub for refugees and migrants, mainly from West Africa attempting to reach southern Europe by sea. The European Union's renewed strategy to stop these migrants and refugees from traveling across the Mediterranean has led to more people being stuck in Libya without money or food. An African Union president, Alpha Conde, has put the blame firmly on the EU, accusing it of encouraging the North African country to keep migrants despite Libya having rival parliaments.
All right, well, we have in the studio the Senior Special Assistant to President Buhari on Foreign Affairs and Diaspora, Honorable Abike Dabiri Erewa. Good morning, and it's good to have you on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you.
Good morning. You're
nice
welcome.
to see you this morning.
Nice yes, indeed. Okay,
and I have to congratulate you for a job well done.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Coming from you, it's humbling. Well, let's start from where President Buhari has promised that every Nigerian living in Libya will be airlifted, or the Nigerians who really want to come back home will be airlifted back home. When they are brought back home, the question is, what next?
Well, first thing is, don't forget that some of you say Nigeria has begun. Nigeria is continuing evacuation of the citizens back home. As far back as January, we actually raised the alarm about Libya. I was there with NEMA officials, NAPTIP officials, and said, avoid Libya. It's deadly, it's dangerous. That was as far back as January. And since then, the International Organization for Migration, working with NEMA, NAPTIP, Refugee Commission, have been bringing back Nigerians stranded in Libya. And thousands have been brought back. And with the president's directive that everybody should be brought back, what is being done now is maybe increasing the flights so that you can bring them back as soon as possible. Like today, a couple of hundreds will be coming back. And then it's going to continue. But what the federal government is planning is maybe at a time have 3, 4, 5 planes to bring back as many as you can at the same time and then get all of them out. So when they come back, what happens? First is Edo State, that has quite a large number of those coming back, have been at the airport. They take the citizens right from the airport. After profiling, they're all profiled. Your state of origin, your name, age, and all that. So Edo takes a large chunk of them. And those that have been going back to Edo State have been engaged in rehabilitation. Quite a number of them have been trained to farm. And then some go through different skills. In fact, one of them is somewhere in Ogun State now. She told me she was so excited. She got her first job to bake outside the state. So she's so happy and excited. So they are acquiring skills and being set up in various fields. Now, some go to the NAPTIP Center. Okay. The NAPTIP Center, especially the small girls. There are girls 13, 14, 15. There are girls that are back with pregnancies. There's a particular girl who said, I can't count the number of men that have slept with me. Oh, yeah. So, and then they are there with their babies. At least at the center, we have about 3 that have their babies there. They go through counseling, rehabilitation, and also skills acquisition. In fact, not too long ago, about 30 were empowered by NAPTIP and supported by the Swiss government. Some just go home. They just go home.
Back to their normal lives.
Back to their normal life. They had a home. Somebody sold them. And we're going to get the fact clear. Slavery begins from here. For every migrant there, a fee has been paid. You're sold.
We'll definitely come to
so
that
some go
particular
home,
point.
and
yes.
then some of them have been enrolled in the Empower program. Some that have returned have been enrolled in the Empower program, and so and then there are opportunities like the government economic empowerment program, the CBN Anchor Borrowers program, which they've been encouraged to participate in and take in. So. Some just go, like I said.
Yeah. Okay, but now with the recent CNN report seemed to bring up a new outcry. But if we really go into the issues, Libya, whether it's slave trade or migrants, is there anything new that's bringing the twist of outcry?
No, I think it's been there. The only thing new is that we saw actuality.
Okay.
We saw visuals. We had a track up of people selling. There's nothing new. As far back as when I was in Parliament, when I chaired the Committee on Diaspora, we brought back 24 that Gaddafi was going to kill. The different thing is that, well, under Gaddafi, there was some kind of leadership. So there was somebody to talk to. So the AU intervened, Gaddafi sent them back, and kept sending them back in batches. But what has changed is that Libya is in crisis. So even when you go to Libya now, outside Tripoli, you really can't get to the detention centers because they are manned by rebels and they block the road. So it's difficult to there are detention centers that you can never get to. But with this outcry and uproar, we're sure, or we're hoping that with the AU-EU task force and intervention, the militia will have to be forced to open those detention centers. So places like Benghazi, Suriname, you can't get there because they're blocked by rebels. So what has changed is the fact that there's crisis in Libya, there's no leadership. Before, well, I don't know which is worse, to be sold as a slave or to be killed. You're actually killed. And I remember the phone number for Libya is +218. Once you say +218, is a cry from somebody in prison and says, well, they've taken A away, maybe it's my turn. And unfortunately, when we raised the alarm in January and said, please don't go, some said, oh, what are you saying? Are you saying go anyway, run out of the country, but don't go through Libya?
That's the point.
Well, but the point was the fact that you can't stop migration, whether legal or illegal. But what we said then was Libya in particular was deadly because of the crisis. I mean, they go through other routes. Some are able to transit to Europe. I mean, it's not right, but you can't stop migration, whether regular or irregular migration.
Very important point you made there. You can't stop migration. Many people observing all of this are saying, look, the push factors are there, and it is important for the Nigerian government, previous and present governments, to do something to actually minimize to the barest minimum the tendency to want to leave the country at all cost. So what exactly is the Nigerian government doing right now to ensure that, look, these young people are not deceived to want to go abroad?
Well, we have to admit that in Africa generally there's been a failure of leadership. And in Nigeria over the years there's been a failure of leadership. And now we have a president who is determined to correct that failure. It's like building a foundation all over again. It's going to be tough. It's going to be rough, but it has to be done. So yes, there's the push and pull factor. I mean, when I was in Addis Ababa, we had, there's always this thing or the other on migration. And one of my comments was, I'm hoping that Africa will get to a point where the leadership will take us to a point where they will be migrating to Africa, not the other way around. So it's critical. Government must play its role of providing an enabling environment for citizens to thrive. But however, ignorance plays a major role. I mean, poverty is an issue, but you can't say because you're poor, you're going to become an armed robber. You can't say because you're poor, you're going to do drugs. Human trafficking is big business. It is big business. For every person trafficked, somebody is making money. Somebody is playing on your ignorance. Just a few days ago, my driver, and is out there, he went to buy some provisions, and the woman was just telling him about how she's looking for 35,000 naira extra to add to some money she's giving somebody, that once she gets that money, her daughter is going to Europe and her life is made. He now said, haven't you heard about all these stories about Libya? She said all she knows is that she's going to Europe. Period.
Okay.
So ignorance plays a major role, and we need to tackle the ignorance bit, while at the same time, government must perform its responsibilities.
All right. Apart from the humanitarian aspect of these are Nigerians, these are human beings, get a plane there, airlift them, take them back to their countries, give them this, give them food, give them... Before they got there in the first place, the concept of the deceit you talked about earlier on, somebody is brainwashing, somebody is cajoling them, somebody is talking. There's a route they go through and all of that. All of those things can be seen as criminal because their being in Libya is a function of someone somewhere who benefited from their being there. Absolutely. How about the investigations of those who are behind all of this? Because it looks like a very strong syndicate.
It is a strong syndicate. And it's a syndicate that goes beyond one country. You find them in the country of origin, transit, and destination. So it's very important that the traffickers are nabbed, arrested, named, and shamed, which is what NAPTIP, which is the organization basically responsible for trafficking is trying to do. Where NAPTIP says they have about 30 that are awaiting prosecution, and they said that in the next couple of days or weeks or months, they're going to nab some more. So yes, arrest, prosecution is very important. And there's also a whistleblower policy. So if you know a trafficker, report a trafficker to NAPTIP because they're destroying our future.
The numbers out there, how do you know?
The numbers are out there.
Okay.
And NAPTIP is going to be sending out numbers. They actually have numbers, which I think they should make more available to the public. So that should be used by members of the public.
Now, speaking of reorientation and all of that, somebody seems to have dropped the ball when it comes to educating the vulnerable and gullible Nigerian that it is not worth it to take that trip. I mean, we've had people on this show who question, what is the job of the NOA, for example? Why are we not hearing from them, you know, telling Nigerians on radio, on TV, everywhere, that, look, young man, young girl, yes, things may be difficult, but it is not worth it taking that deadly trip.
Yes, you saw the NOA meeting with the DG, NAPTIP, and Refugee Commission. So I'm sure very soon they'll come up with programs and policy. But in the meantime, what is being done is actually, you know, going to the communities, going to the markets, the communities, the artisans, the workers, and telling them. So that is going on. You might not see it on radio and television, but you have officers of NAPTIP going into the communities to talk to the real people. And I keep saying that let's each one teach one. My driver just saved one woman from sending her daughter to Europe. So yes, a lot more needs to be done in that regard. But you know, it's something that we've always known, talked about, and exposed it, but it didn't trend. Yeah. It's trending now because CNN gave us visuals. It's not something that, in fact, there was time videos were circulating about the way women were being treated in Libya, and it went viral over the, but it's like, oh, well, maybe it's just one of those things. So yes, a lot more needs to be done in terms of awareness campaign, but right now, especially in Edo State, they're going into the markets, to the communities, to talk to them, involve traditional rulers, everybody. And I recall that years back, we visited the Oba of Benin, and he went on national, the late Oba of Benin. He went on national television and said, I place a curse on any family that sells their children. And it worked, but it should have been sustained. You know, so now that we know it's getting worse and all that, hopefully the awareness
You say it worked. In what way?
It worked because it went down.
Yes. The numbers reduced.
The numbers reduced because they listened to him.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he said, I'll curse you.
When it comes to obeying the Oba in Benin, certainly everyone knows how it plays out.
Something that's taken very seriously. Now, in engaging the Libyan authorities, for example, you cited earlier that, of course, there's crisis in Libya. It was more organized under Gaddafi somewhat. So who is the Nigerian government engaging with now to ensure that, you know, the problems that Nigerians are facing in Libya is actually...
well, there's a UN-backed recognized government.
Okay, yes.
So, but at the same time, if you talk to the UN-backed government and the rebels don't open the gates for you to pass through, you can't pass through. So with the AU-EU intervention, they've set up an emergency task force that will make it possible. So that will help. Like I said, there are places you can't even get to. So they have to be enforced. It has to be enforced that open these doors, open the gates. There are many you haven't even seen. So we can't even say these are the statistics. The statistics you get are the ones that you can see within Tripoli. So going outside Tripoli, it can't even be. But with what is going on now, there has to be sanctions against Libya as a country to ensure that the doors are open. In fact, they don't have to wait for countries to leave their citizens. Send them to their various countries.
All right. Now, I know that Nigeria has a mission or an embassy in Libya. How do they try to help in this case?
Yes, we have a small mission there with the Chargé d'Affaires, and they actually go to the centers to meet with them, to speak with them, and somehow those in the centers have a way of using phones, so they do communicate.
Okay.
They go to the centers, they meet with them, and like I said, since January, they've been coming back. Maybe 200 today, 250 next week. So they've actually been coming back, and the Chargé actually meets with them. But it's just that it wasn't an issue that the world decided that would be on the front burner. But with the CNN investigative report, I hope this will change the whole thing for good.
And speaking of which, it's not only Libya where Nigerian migrants are facing this kind of atrocities. There's the case of 26 Nigerians that were buried without the knowledge of the Nigerian government. In Italy, of course. What are you doing about that now?
Well, first is we can't even say 26 Nigerians. We know
because we're not too sure
if they're all Nigerians. We know 3
yes.
are Nigerians. Now, in this particular instance, Italy was communicating with NAPTIP, and we were communicating. I mean, NAPTIP will give us the information, and the information was that they will be buried on the 26th. And it was so planned in such a way that there was a big conference on human trafficking in Italy on the 21st, I think. Yeah. So we were going to have NAPTIP officials also stay behind and participate in the burial. But we all watched on television. On the 17th, they were buried. That was 9 days earlier. So that made government appear irresponsible. Nobody was there. But nobody could be there because they buried them 9 days earlier. My office wrote to the Italian embassy for an explanation.
What is their response?
They apologized for the mix-up. They said, well, they're sorry about the mix-up in the dates in communication. But however, said it's important for both countries to continue to work together to stem human trafficking, and said if the families want the bodies exhumed, they can be exhumed. But how would you even know whether it's those bodies that are exhumed?
Yeah.
You know, how would you know?
Okay. Now,
so again, like I said, 3 are confirmed to be, maybe all are Nigerians, but we don't know. But 3 are confirmed to be Nigerians.
All right, this mix-up has made, because Nigerians were following, a lot of Nigerians I know were following this development, and
they were angry.
They were angry because
it
made it look like the Nigerian government doesn't place value on
but
Nigeria.
That is why we investigated, wrote to the Italian embassy, and also apologized and gave that information out. You can't be at a place you didn't know. So the question is, why did Italy do that? Why did you bury 9 days earlier? And the letter is they say we're sorry. And then while we're doing that, the slavery thing happened.
Yes.
You know, so which is even more enraging. So while we're on that, the slavery thing happened. And the key thing now is just get everybody back.
So has the Nigerian government accepted that apology from the Italian government?
No, they're still talking with NAPTIP.
Okay.
You know, because they're saying now that what Italy is saying is, well, if you want your bodies, but again, if you want your bodies, how do you know the bodies that where do you start from? So NAPTIP has been engaging with the Italian embassy and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs doing the same thing.
All right, let's come back to the issue of Libya. This troubling dimension to it, that Nigerians are actually, Nigerians of course and Ghanaians, are the ones mostly who are the slave masters in Libya. How is this coming to the Nigerian government?
But again, it's always been the case. Like I said, the slavery begins here. You know, a mother decides to sell her property to take her, and by the way, there are a lot of boys. We keep saying girls.
Yeah.
There are a lot of boys also trafficked. But a lot of times, if they're a bit older, they sell themselves. So the slavery begins here, because for every person trafficked, it's not a free journey. You pay a lot of money, almost 500,000 naira, to go on that journey. And then you're sold again and again. Some are sold like 3-4 times. Whoa. You know, so the slavery begins here. And that is why this enlightenment is important. Like I said, there's a lot of ignorance involved, and every one of us just have to get involved. It's not just a government thing now. NGOs, just talk to everybody. Each one, teach one, as I always say. So it begins here, and it's pathetic. You see, it's a gang that includes everybody. Not just Nigerians, Arabs, other African countries, and they are making good money. That's why it's important that the traffickers must be arrested, prosecuted, named and shamed.
All right, there are known routes for this exit of at least from the mentioned routes in Sokoto State, the mentioned routes in part of Katsina State, exactly,
Sokoto.
exactly, and
Agadez
they go through Agadez and all of that. What would it take to block those routes?
Well, you have to ask immigration that, but
I'm talking from the perspective of the government now.
Yeah, that's immigration. The CG was, we were on a program together yesterday, and he spoke about everything immigration is doing to block those routes. But he also said, don't forget that in West Africa, there's a free movement. There's actually a free movement within West African region. So you don't need a visa to go through those routes. So you can move from here to Ghana to other parts within West Africa. So, but what you now do is when you suspect maybe a large number, because they take them in batches. When you suspect a large number, then you should be able to intercept them. But there's free movement within the region. Is there a need to begin to review this free movement?
Because it seems like it's totally absolute now, and it's not paying Nigeria well.
Well, with an AU-EU task force now in place, I'm sure these are issues that should be looked into. But also don't forget that the EU can also make irregular migration regular. They can make it regular. And it's part of the discussion going on. And a global compact on migration will be adopted at the UN in July. It's part of the conversation going on. How can you regularize irregular migration? Some of these people just want a better life, really. They just want a job.
Don't we all want a better life?
Those jobs are there. Some that have migrated can have their papers regularized.
Okay.
You know, so it's part of what the world is looking at. So in July, just like they did with the SDGs, I hope it works. But they're coming up with a global compact on migration.
Okay. Now, there was an AU-EU summit recently, and I wonder what the commitments from the European Union and those countries are to this migrant issues from Africa.
If you ask me, really not enough commitment. So maybe this would be just a blessing in disguise. The outcry over the slavery thing. I think a lot more can be done by both the AU and the EU. Because it goes beyond one nation. You can't do it alone because it's a ring. So both the AU and the EU should not just stop at setting up a task force, an emergency thing, and then keep quiet. So the world needs to pay attention to this, because we must not go back to the dark ages of slavery. It's not acceptable. Even if you say Nigerians are involved, if there's no demand, there will be no supply.
There'll be no supply.
So while you curb the supply side, how are they migrating? Immigration, what is going on? They should curb the demand side. Look, there are some cases where they know this is happening, but they encourage it and, you know, keep them somewhere.
And that's a question. Is there some kind of international conspiracy that is feeding, that's giving oxygen to this?
Trafficking is an international ring. It is, the people are powerful and they are rich.
How far is this investigation? Because you've talked about investigations, you know.
It was just set up.
How far-reaching will these investigations be? Will it get to the extent of the end point? Because I read somewhere that 75% of those sold from Nigeria, actually from southern Nigeria, and many of them end up in the organ harvest markets and all of that.
Well, like I said, it's a high-powered ring that needs to be tackled and dismantled. And the organ trade thing, again, maybe until you actually see, that's why we're worried that these girls were buried without anybody, 9 days earlier.
Because they could be victims of so many different things.
Of organ trafficking. We hear stories of when they kill you, they take your organs. And they've been killing them for ages. You know, when you're even on the Mediterranean, they just push you inside the water. So hopefully, it's not just going to be AU, EU has a task force, and that's the end of it. So hopefully, but the key thing is nabbing the traffickers. They're rich, they're powerful, they're strong.
Yeah, yes, indeed.
All right, let's talk about the issue of house helps and maids sometimes, and if we like, someone recently was likening the same thing to what happens even here in Lagos and all of that.
Somebody said we're all involved in slave trade.
So someone put up an analogy, and it seemed to be almost similar, where girls are brought from different parts of the country, and then there's a madam who has, you know, an agency and gives out.
Again, that's
how different is that?
That's trafficking. And NAPTIP I was with the DJ a few days ago. They're also looking at this. And you see, it's a whole lot. We're even talking about this route to Libya. And then you say south, a lot of them are from the south side, but the demography is changing. So from that side, going to Italy, Europe, they are from the south basically. But when you look at places like Burkina Faso, Mali, they're from the southwest. Then when you now go to places like Saudi Arabia, Cairo, Morocco, they're from the north. And it's more worrisome because we're talking about, if you go to the streets of Morocco, you see small girls. Burkina Faso, they just sent back about 50. Little girls of 12, 13, 14. You know, so it's something, and you know, drug trafficking I guess, it's easier to detect now. So a lot of more people are going to human trafficking. So we shouldn't wait. The world has to pay attention to this. It's not about just Nigeria, but the world. And I'm glad that the AU-EU summit was perfectly timed. It came at a time there was an outrage. So we all need to monitor what the AU and EU will be doing about this issue of trafficking.
All right, now the African leaders themselves are saying we need to do something. ECOWAS on one hand say we have to do something. If I remember one of the strong statements saying that ECOWAS will not accept maltreatment of its citizens by Libya and as the case may be.
Or any other country for that matter.
These things, how committed are all African African leaders or heads of governments to these things? Because it's one thing to make all the beautiful statements, but if there is no collaboration.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't be in the minds of our leaders, but we hope they will mark their words with action.
But Nigeria? But
President Buhari is matching his words with action. First thing is bring them back. He's giving the directive. And that's exactly what don't forget that there's an emergency task force under the leadership of the Vice President that has everybody working together. NEMA, NAPTIP, Refugee Commission, Immigration Security Agencies, my office, and IOM. Yeah. You know, so work is going on. The first thing is come back. The second thing is massive awareness. Don't be surprised that in all these anger and outcry, some are still getting ready to go.
Exactly.
And when we keep saying, oh, well, it's poverty, the trafficker is happy.
Because he's making more money.
Yes.
He's making bank.
So that's why I'm saying that, yes, you know, poverty has to be dealt with, but the ignorance. If there's a guy that was on the program yesterday, and he told us all his experience, if he knew he was going to go through that, this was a guy who wasn't even poor. He had a job, but somebody said, don't worry now. Once you get, and you know what they do? They show you pictures of maybe one, yes. Yeah. If 100 migrants get on a boat to go to Europe, in those days, maybe 10 will survive. Now, maybe none will survive. Because as you've said, organ trafficking is there. A lot of them that die, that are buried, they sell their organs. It's also big business. So poverty is there, but every one of us should take this seriously. And that's why I'm saying each one, teach one.
Is government funding these agencies, NAPTIP and the rest of them that are supposed to be charged with ensuring that this doesn't happen? The IOM has complained that the issue of funding is a key. It is a key factor.
It is a key factor.
How committed is the Nigerian government now?
Financially? Well, the Nigerian government is committed. The financial implications will be considered, but funding is never enough. So we all have to think outside the box and see how this can be done. And again, I think some people have been offering to help. For instance, when they come, you know, some people offer support and all that. So we shouldn't just say that's just a government thing. We're dealing about human lives here, you know. So children, young children, so everybody can get involved. Funding will always be an issue. Funding can never, ever be enough.
All right, we have to leave it here right now, and maybe follow up
with... Yes. We also, don't forget that we also have the good part of migration.
Oh, okay.
The good part of migration. We have Nigerians excelling everywhere in the world.
Oh, absolutely. So that's the good part.
Someday we'll talk about the
What
good
we're
part.
talking about is illegal migration. But the good part of migration too may be rubbing off negatively on Nigeria.
Yeah, we have heard some informal reports where some of the illegal migrants have gotten involved with some very good endeavors when they get to their destination, especially for those who are able to cross over to Italy, Sicily, and Cyprus.
Even the United States, in the US, for example, 70% of black doctors are Nigerians. And I
Anyway,
wonder
so
what,
someday
what
we'll look
your
at the good
department
side.
is
We'll
doing.
look at all of those
we're looking at the downside now.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll talk about the good side of
Okay,
migration.
hopefully.
We look forward to that. We've been talking with the Senior Special Assistant to the Nigerian President on Foreign Affairs and Diaspora, Honorable Abike Dabiri-Erewa, on the issues in Libya. And she has really given us some info on what government is doing here. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so
It's
much.
been a
Hope to
pleasure.
see you again.
Thank you.